My name is Bob Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. We spend a lot of time on resentment. The book says it's number one offender. If you've noticed something, when we did the first three columns on the resentment list process, it was almost as if I took the position of the prosecuting attorney. And then from this was our course, through referring to our list again, I've had to take the position of the defense attorney. One place, I'm looking at it from my self-centered prosecuting point of view and judgment, and then I have to look at it from an other-centered point of view and put myself in their place and see it through their eyes. And that's where the shift, the change of perception comes, the 180-degree turn. And one of the great things that happens to me as a result, not only of doing this myself in my own fourth and fifth step, but then consequently over the years through listening to other fifth steps, is that I start to get that maybe what Einstein said was true when he said the great illusion of mankind is that there's more than one of us here. You listen to enough fifth steps and you do enough inventories, and you know what you see? You see the same guy in different towns with different faces doing the same thing to different people. It's the same guy. It's never any different. I'm waiting for a different fifth step. I'm waiting. Sometimes I wish that it would be different. I wish somebody would come up with something new with, fluids and barnyard animals and jumper cables and visqueen or something. But it's never anything that exciting or dramatic. It's just the same pathetic judgments and the same pathetic insecurities and fears and the same pathetic self-justified sexual gratification endeavors and excursions. It's the same stuff over and over and over and over. We're all the same. The Hindus, we were talking about the Hinduism at lunch a little bit. The Hindus have a story of creation that is marvelous. Unlike the Judeo-Christian story of creation where God created the heaven and the earth in 7 days, etc., the Hindus have their story of creation is called Maya, which means the great illusion. And their story is that God existed unto himself with nothing else for endless in eons, for endlessness. And after eons of endlessness unto himself with nothing else, he became bored. So he created this cosmic game. And what the game was, he decided to break himself up into an infinite number of parts, give all the parts amnesia, and the game is which parts are going to realize they're not separate first. And isn't the separation the illusion of the ego? That it comes from my judgment. My judgment, the greatest judgment, the biggest wrong I've ever had is that my case is different. That I'm not like you. You wouldn't understand me. But the real truth is that in the realm of the Spirit, and that's one of the things it's going to talk about later in the steps, that we are going to enter into the realm of the Spirit. In the realm of the Spirit, there is no separation. There is no separation. And the Hindus called that enlightenment. When you finally got it, that there is no separation between you and me and you and God. It's all the same. It's all the same. But the illusions of the ego and the defenses that we create the separation. I'll give you a little example of this. I want to go through the process of resentment real quickly with one resentment and to show you exactly how it works. And if you have a resentment that's unresolved, the best resentments to work this with are ones that are justified. They're the best ones to work it with. Okay, I'll tell you the story, the kind of the prelude to the resentment. When I was 6 years sober, I got married to a gal I met in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we were married for 4.5 years. When we were married almost 3 years, maybe a little less than 3 years, we had a child, my daughter, Katie, who is the love of my life. We just had her 16th birthday party, and she's just a sweetheart. And we had Katie, and then about a year and a half, about a year after we had Katie, my wife came to me one day and told me that she wanted a divorce. And I'll tell you, one of the symptoms of my own particular self-centeredness when I'm in it is that I don't get it. If I'm fine, I think the world's fine. I don't pay attention. I don't get it if there's something wrong with you unless you tell me and wave a flag in my face. I'll just ignore it wrapped up in me, right? And I didn't think there was a problem in the marriage. Matter of fact, somebody would ask me, I'd say, oh, we got the perfect day, marriage, it's wonderful. Didn't even know until she asked me for a divorce. Then I got it. Okay, maybe there's a problem here. And I said to her, Jesus, really? What's wrong? Well, I'm just not happy. I just don't want to even. So I talked her out of the divorce. I said, let's go to some marriage counseling. And she agreed. She said, okay, we'll try the marriage counseling. We started entering into marriage counseling. And the guy, my first sponsor, who was my sponsor back then, had retired, and he bought a bus. And he was on an extended 6-month to a year sabbatical incommunicado, could not talk to him. He was traveling around the country in this bus. And he was somewhere in Kentucky or Washington, D.C., or somewhere on the East Coast at the time in this deal he was in. And so my confidant through all of this, the guy I started talking to, was a guy that I sponsored named Craig, who was sober at the time about 3 years. And he was sort of one of my favorite pigeons that I sponsored. And him and I he was the guy that I would talk to about the marriage problems and about what was going on in counseling, etc. He was my confidant. Went to marriage counseling for a couple months. And one day, my wife comes up to me and she says, I don't want to do the marriage counseling anymore. I'm one out. And I said, okay. And there was something wasn't happening in the marriage counseling. And no matter what would come up, she would say something. I'd say, okay, we can try that. And we'd try it, and nothing would be different. It was still a problem there. It was like, I didn't know what it was. And I just thought, well, maybe it's just meant to be. And we decided to get a divorce. And in Las Vegas, an uncontested divorce can happen quickly. I mean, like 10 days. It's quick. And we got a divorce on a Thursday. The papers were finalized. Friday, the next day, my wife and daughter moved in with Craig, my best friend, my sponsee, my confidant. And I find out that they had been sleeping together for over the last year of my marriage. And I didn't know about it. And I found out that everybody in AA knew about it except me. Now, here I am. I'm in my 11th year of sobriety. And you guys have been telling me for almost 11 years that there's no such thing as a justifiable resentment. Well, I got one now. And I can even get old timers in AA to agree with me. I got that ability, maybe some of you have it, walking into a room, 50 people, and just intuitively know who to go to that'll side with you. You know what I mean? That'll agree with you, that'll co-sign your crap. And it doesn't matter how long they're sober. And I'd find those guys sober 25, 30 years. I'd tell them my tale of woe, and they'd say things to me like, geez, Bob, and God, didn't you just buy her a new car? And I'd go, yes, I did. And the nail holes in my hands would open up from the cross a little bigger, and it was hideous. It was awful. And I'm dying. And I tell you, if there was a short period of time, not very long, where I got some vindication and I got some mileage out of being a victim. You do get a lot of attention after being really hurt. You get a little bit of attention and you get that ego pump of feeling smugly superior. Well, I've never cheated on her, that kind of crap. But I'll tell you, even though you get a little bit of ego gratification from that, if you're an alcoholic of my type, you start to get real sick of spirit right in here. Real sick. And it's forcing me into my head, and I'm going crazy. And I can't get rid of it. And I sat down with this book, and I was going to try to do the resentment inventory, and it was too close. I couldn't do it yet. And I'd go to meetings, and I would talk about it in meetings, and people would line up to give me advice. Oh, and it was hideous. One guy said to me, well, Bob, just don't think about it. I thought, oh, how do you do that? I mean, how do you stop thinking about something you can't stop thinking about? One guy said to me, well, if you believed in God, it wouldn't be a problem. I thought, oh, man, what are you talking? I wanted to hit him. I believe in God, but it's a problem. And God was very, very merciful to me. Thank God that I had a high level of involvement in AA, and all of a sudden, it was funny how God works. All of a sudden, I got more guys asking me to sponsor them with various lengths of sobriety that are going through divorces and relationship breakups. I mean, there are waves of them are coming, and I'd fill my car up with a bunch of them. And we'd drive to the meeting, go to the meeting. We'd be the depressed section of the meeting, you know. And you'd almost hear the chairman tell the secretaries. The secretaries tell the chairman, don't call on them, you know, they'll talk about that stuff. And these guys relieved me of the bondage of self. They gave me islands in my day where I would get me off of me a little bit. I remember just being insane. I just came from dropping my daughter off at the house where they lived all together and watched them wave goodbye as I drove away alone. My daughter and him and her standing there, and I'm dying inside. And I'm dying. And I drove over to pick up this guy I'm sponsoring that's an idiot, and I don't want to pick him up. And he gets in the car, and he's sitting next to me in the car, and he starts crying because he can't see his kids, and he hasn't seen them in 2 years. And another birthday for his one daughter just went by. And I got out of myself a little bit, you know. And those islands of relief from me bought me enough time to eventually go back and do this process. And I put both their names down, column number 1. Column number 2, what they did, the lies, the infidelity, the cheating, the whole deal. Column number 3, what was hurt, threatened, affected, or interfered with, everything. My pride was devastated. My ambitions, my pocketbook, my emotional and material security, my relationships in AA, my sex relations, everything was threatened. Everything was hurt. Everything was affected. Nothing was left untouched. And then it says this was our course. And it's asking me to do something that was very hard to do. I had to look at the situation through their eyes. How would they be seeing it if they were telling their sponsor about it? If they were honest with themselves about what happened, what would they be saying to themselves or to someone else? The book says this was our course. We must realize I had to get it. That though I didn't like the symptoms of their sickness and how they affected me, that they were like me. Spiritually sick. And I said that prayer. And I'll tell you what I started to get. I started to get a sense of what it must have been like to be my ex-wife in that marriage. I started to understand what it would have been like to be a gal who grew up in an alcoholic home, not as I did. I didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. An alcoholic home that by the time she entered into sobriety, she had developed certain defense mechanisms that rendered her absolutely incapable of confrontation. Absolutely incapable of being dissatisfied and telling someone about it because she was too afraid of their rejection. And she marries a guy who's Mr. AA, who goes to a lot of meetings, and he's got this opportunity in business to build this business, but he's got to, all of a sudden, after they're married for a little while, he's got to work 70 hours a week to build this business, which was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But she put her whole life around a guy, and in short order, a guy that really wasn't there very much. A guy that worked 70 hours a week and then did AA commitments to keep his own sanity and was gone most of the time. And I started to get a sense, she didn't have the involvement in a job or a business. She didn't work. She didn't have the life that filled her up that I had. I was the life that she turned to fill up. And I ain't there. And when I started to really get it, where she was coming from, and really understand and realize inside myself the desolation and the loneliness that she must have experienced in that marriage, and her trappedness, because she didn't have the skills to get out of it. She didn't have the skills to get involved in a lot of stuff and fill her life up. She didn't have the skills to even tell me she was dissatisfied. Everything was fine all the time. And I pictured myself in that trap. And when I really got it, I thought to myself, my God, how did she last as long as she did? I would have had an affair a year before she did. And I would have felt awful about doing it. And Karen felt awful about doing it. She suffered tremendous from that action. She really did. And I started to look at the last part. Where was I selfish, dishonest, resentful, afraid, self-seeking? And you know what I saw that was really, when I went through these questions, where was I selfish? The whole thing was about me. I am so wrapped up in myself, in my little plans and designs, that I never once stopped to consider what's going on with her. I never got other-centered enough to wonder how full her life is, because mine was fine, thank you. I never got other-centered enough to ever wonder, is this plan of mine to work 70 hours a week and do all this AA and leaving you here by yourself, is that okay for you? I never even asked. I just had the blinders on of selfishness. This is my little plans and designs. And where was I dishonest? Oh, God. I lied to myself about a lot of stuff. I had a lot of justifications. I remember one of them was, even when I started to look at some of this stuff, I started saying, yeah, but I had to do all that. I mean, my God, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have this business. I mean, I've been stupid not to do it, and I had to work 70 hours a week, and that was true. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I did have to work, I had probably 60 anyway. But I'm a little over-the-top obsessive guy. And I became a little bit of a workaholic. And that's all true. And it was also true that because of that high involvement level in at work and having a wife and kids and everything, I had to do AA or go crazy. That's all true. But there's a deeper truth. And the deeper truth is, even though there is some element of validity in those justifications, those things were also very convenient. Because my big secret is I don't know how to do intimacy. My big secret is after about 6 or 8 months in a relationship, I've told you all the funny stories about my childhood. We've done all the little conversation stuff. Now, all of a sudden, there's dead air and a living day-by-day adventure with another human being I've never had and didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to grow together with someone. I didn't know how to integrate myself in a partnership in someone else's life. And it was an awkward, when the stories were over and the shine of everything wore off, there was an emptiness in there and a feeling of inadequacy, and so I got it was very convenient to get busy because I didn't know what else to do. And guys like me, when the vacancy's on you, it's one way to get away from it is to stay busy. So I worked 70 hours a week. And I had AA commitments, and I sponsored guys, and I was on committees, and I was all that stuff. Where was I dishonest? And I made this illusion in my mind of what a great husband I was. Such a bunch of crap. I was great in the fact that I was a good provider and I never cheated on her, but in the real day-to-day things that really matter, I sucked. I was terrible. On the matters of the heart, the things that really have substance in a relationship, I was terrible. I'd never grown up. Was I terrible because I was a bad guy? No, I just never learned how to do that stuff. As if I don't know what it is about me. I won't ask for help in an area because I think I should know. You know, I should know. I don't want to look like I don't know. I didn't know. Where was I self-seeking? It was all about me and trying to fill my holes, trying to keep everything juggled and in place. And where was I frightened? Oh my God, I was scared to death. I remember a night, my wife was pregnant and my daughter was coming pretty soon. I remember a night when I was so overcome with anxiety and fear, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I remember getting in my car and driving up into Utah and drove hundreds of miles, and I didn't ever want to come back. I was scared to death. I was a guy who never even could take care of myself. And now I had a wife and a child on the way. And I was overwhelmed. It was just too big. It was too much for me. You see, I was back in the driver's seat. God was not running my life. Somehow it got to be back in my care. If I'd have trusted God, I'd just been able to show up for the next thing. But I had it right here on me. And it was overwhelming. I was scared to death. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where was I to blame? I'll tell you something that became real clear to me. If I would, entering into that marriage, if I would have went to a major university and hired every genius, every professor that was expert in the areas of psychology and sociology, and I brought them together in a big conference room, and I gave them the psychological profiles of the gal I was going to marry, and tell them everything about her, and let them interview them, and then said to them, in light of all of this information, here's a gal that's faithful, good-natured, loving, kind, monogamous. Can you gentlemen come up with a game plan that I can implement over the next couple years that would make her cheat on me? Can you come up with something like that? I'm telling you, whatever they would have come up with wouldn't have been as more effective than what I did. See, I'm the guy. Sometimes people hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in that position to be hurt. I'm the guy. And I was able to do the same thing for him. He was actually easier. She was the harder stretch for me. Because the minute I started to put myself in his position, it was like, oh yeah. I remember him one time saying to me, he got sober and he was a lonely guy and he didn't do very well with women and he really wanted a relationship. And he said to me one time, he said, God, if I could just someday have what you have with Karen. I didn't think he meant specifically. I thought he meant in a general way, right? But when I was able to do this was our course with him, and I mean, he had her on a pedestal of like my sponsor's wife, and she's young and beautiful and all this. And she's sober a long time, longer than him, and all this other stuff. And then knowing what it's like to be a guy, I know as a guy, and I know what happened. The details in their deal was she initiated it all out of her resentment towards me because she was lonely and pissed because I was gone. And I know as a guy, there have been times in my life where I have had the most noble, honorable intentions, really good of heart, and I've been with a gal and absolutely had made up my mind, this is on the square here, there's nothing going to happen here, we're just going to be friends and this is just the way it is. And a gal can do certain things and touch me in a certain way where I will be frantically looking for that resolve. I know it was here a minute ago. Where did that go? I mean, and it's gone. And I know that about me. I know that's why I will avoid situations where I'm liable to do something that later I'm going to think, God, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Not because I'm such a great guy. I've learned, if nothing else, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've learned to protect Bob from Bob. And so I could see him very easily, and myself and him very easily. And I came out the backside of that, and I realized I owed both of them a tremendous amends. And I tell you what happened when I made the amends to her. It was 3 parts. The first part, I said something to her that I think in the bottom of her soul she wanted to hear. I told her how sorry I was for not being there for her. And more importantly, I told her that I got it. I understood what she went through. And I understood exactly how what happened. And I think she'd wanted to hear me. She wanted me to get that so bad. And there was a healing not only in me as a result of that amends, but in her. And we've become really good friends. And I did the same thing with him. And part of my amends to him and to her is that I went around Alcoholics Anonymous like an idiot for about 6 months. Every time they'd let me share at a meeting, I would tell my tale of woe, justifying sharing it at meetings that I need to get this off my chest. And no, that's a bunch of crap. You know what I was really doing? I wanted everybody in the meeting to think of them as badly as I did. I wanted everybody that would listen to me to hate them the way I hated them. And I'll tell you something, I did a lot of harm to them. And I harmed their reputation because I didn't tell the whole truth. I told my self-centered, judgmental, vindictive version of it. And part of the amends to them was to go around and tell the truth. And the truth was that they didn't do anything that I wouldn't have done if somebody had put me in the position I put them in. That they weren't bad guys. They were people that were just like me. And that I could have easily done the same thing that they did. And what a tremendous healing that occurred as a result of this part of the book. See, I came out the other side and I'm free. I sponsor him. I sponsored him now for a long time. There was about a couple-year period where I didn't. And he was lost. He almost died as a result of that. He had a hard time taking himself off the hook. And I had a tremendous amends to make to him because I bad-rapped him and I hurt his reputation. I tried to stab him in the back by slander and gossip in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wanted everybody to... You know what I really secretly wanted? I wanted everybody to hate him and ostracize him from AA so he would have to die of alcoholism. All right? Pretty pathetic. And I had to go make amends to him. He's an outstanding member of my home group. He's one of the best guys I sponsor today. And I'll tell you what else he is. Him and Karen got married after that, and it's pretty hard to maintain a relationship when you start like that. And they eventually got divorced. And I'll tell you, a funny thing happened. I'd have never guessed. I spent 6 months working with both of them, trying to help them to save their marriage. Isn't that a bizarre thing? Isn't that a bizarre thing? You know why I did it? I really believed in my heart they were good for each other. They were much better together than her and I ever were. And you know what else? He was an incredible stepfather to my daughter, and still is. I introduce him to people as my ex-husband-in-law. And we just were at my daughter's birthday, and we're just palling it up and crying and laughing and having a good time. And even the fact that they're divorced, he's still part of my daughter's life. He's a good guy. We've sat the three of us in ball games and cheered my daughter on and booed the other team, and it's a great thing. There's a tremendous power in this thing called resentment. And I'll tell you, if you're sitting here and all you've ever done is tell somebody your life story, you've missed a lot of this, really. I would highly recommend going back and following this procedure and finding someone else that can help you do it.